Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome to Ferret Face Fail Productions. So today we're out at Captain Jack's in Colorado Springs, Colorado for the first ride on the FSE250E. I think many people feel like buying a Chinese dirt bike's a little bit like going to Las Vegas and finding the cheapest hooker you can for the night, then going to your local Elvis church and getting married and expecting to live happily ever after. I mean, really, how reliable could a cheap Chinese dual sport really be? I think that's what many people are worried about, is the reliability and the parts availability and things like, will I ever be able to fix this in a few years, and is there a company locally that will take care of me if something goes wrong? Now, I haven't had the FSE250E very long, but I can tell you so far that I don't think for $4,000 you'll have a better deal. And these bikes are backed by a company that imports these in Utah. So you have US-based companies sending you parts as well as having parts availability here, and that makes me really happy. So far, working with GPX Moto and Gary over there, which is the owner, has been great. Him and his staff have taken care of us. Any sort of issues that we've had or broken parts that may have came in shipping have been replaced pretty much overnighted to our house. So that's the kind of service that you get, and the community is fantastic. So you go out onto Facebook or anywhere else, and you'll see real quick that there's a really good sized community that love these bikes. They know how to fix them, work on them, and manuals and things are being translated and made. So I feel like they're finally being supported. I generally don't like to do my reviews as a voiceover format. I think it's kind of weird personally, but you know, my audio got all messed up from writing, so we are here right now. I think right away the biggest thing that people always notice about the FSE250 is that it looks like an air-cooled 250 KTM. I think that's my favorite thing. I had quite a few comments from riders that had passed by, as well as when we showed up with some of the group that we were riding with, that they're like, what is that bike? And I think it was exciting to a lot of people because when I explained it to them, this bike feels a lot like an XR250R. I had the pleasure of riding Hermit Dovlog's XR250R. He had totally refreshed and rebuilt that bike. It was easy to start. It was fun to ride. It was a torquey, air-cooled motor. And really, I know a lot of people yearn for that kind of bike again. And I can see why. They are such a fantastic trail bike. They have very usable power. Not to mention the fun factor is great for something that doesn't cost a lot of money. The FSE 250E has a great torquey little motor with a fantastic suspension. In fact, I know that these are not a direct copy of KTM forks or shocks. They have an open cartridge design in the front, but they feel fantastic. And at this price point, there's no other bike that you're going to get that has a suspension that's adjustable like this. I think at this price, you're pretty much stuck with a KLX 230 dual sport bike, and that thing has probably the softest, saggiest suspension that I've ever sat on and ridden around on. Not to mention a lackluster motor. For $4,000, you really can't beat the FSE 250E. Now, chugging up Captain Jack's here in Colorado, we start at a lovely low altitude of right around, I think, 7,000 feet is where we start at. So where we end up kind of towards the top is right around 10,000 feet where the snow kind of stops us. And this bike is carbureted. Now, I know a lot of people still really like carburation, and this may be a huge thing to a lot of people that want the reliability and simplicity of having a carburetor. So far, I found with my simple jetting, I basically just leaned out the needle on this carburetor. It's a Nibby PE style carburetor. And pretty simple to take apart and adjust and rejet if you need to, but this ride up here at altitude felt very good. In fact, a lot of my throttle issues of bogging up at the higher altitude were pretty much gone. So even all the way up at the top, I never felt like this bike was dying, chugging, or drowning in its fuel, so I was very happy with the entire performance of the bike. Also keep in mind it's not fully broke in, so this was my break-in ride as well. So full disclosure, I did have one problem with the bike so far, and that is the speedo cable. So it's kind of a known issue with some of the GPX bikes. The speedo cable either just wasn't manufactured quite right or wasn't quite long enough. And GPX Moto is fantastic. They are sending out free replacement cables, and quite quickly too. I know I got mine 2 days shipped for the FSE 300, and this one for the 250 is also coming. So that's the only fault I've had. My perspective, this little engine is probably different than yours if you have an FSE250E. And that's simply because I live at high altitude, so I am for sure missing a certain amount of power, and there's nothing wrong with that. I expect that. I've almost always had to deal with losing power at higher altitude. So the 250 feels a lot like the power from the original XR250 engine. I do feel like the top end or mid-range to top end is a lot more on this newer designed engine than the old XR, but this motor really runs very well. From dragging me up these steep hills, climbing up this stuff, to some snow we had to chug through, to over roots and whatnot. I didn't have any issues with the engine at all. I never felt like I needed more power. Now, I definitely enjoy more power, given that riding my Beta 390 makes hopping over things pretty much effortless. You got to plan a little bit more with a small displacement. But I didn't feel like I was wanting a whole bunch more power. I believe that this motor is rated right around 19 horsepower, technically on paper, so take that for what it is. That's pretty much right in line with most every 250 out there. That's on the lower side of either air-cooled or even some of the lower-end water-cooled engines like the KLX 250S. Another cool feature is that this is a 6-speed transmission, so you don't see a lot of that. Oftentimes these cheaper bikes like the XT250 and stuff still are using a 5-speed transmission. So I find that the transmission on this bike is pretty phenomenal for even in its stock configuration. The grunt down low and overall gearing stock, I think I'm going to leave it this way. I can't see lowering the gearing down anymore because I feel like I'd lose a lot of capability if people want to ride on the street at all. In 6th gear, I think I top out around 55 to 60 pretty comfortably, and you could probably do 65. Much more than that, I'd want to gear up if I were going to be doing any sort of long road riding on this bike. It absolutely can be done, though, and these bikes do come with the ability to plate them in a lot of states, so it's a cool feature, too. Riding this bike makes me remember why I love my DR350 and why I've fell in love with a lot of the older dual sports and trail bikes. This bike is simple, it's got electric start, it's a carbureted bike, it runs good, it has torque, it's fun, has an adjustable and very good off-road suspension, and there's really nothing you can find on it to fault it. There's not complications, there's no radiators or hoses, there's nothing you really have to worry about breaking on it. And there's something about the simplicity of the FSE 250E that I've really fallen in love with, even over our 300R, the 450R, and even the TSE 250, which is the two-stroke model. These bikes are rated at right around, I think, 250 pounds with gas, so we're going to do some weight later on. I have not weighed this bike with fuel in it yet, so we'll kind of hold judgment there, but it does feel like a relatively light bike. It definitely has a lightness over the 300R model. This bike is more flickable, a little bit more out of the corners and stuff. It just feels more comfortable, and it feels a little bit more planted, I think. I know Chinese bikes have pretty much always had a bad rap for having poor reliability and an inability to get parts quickly, especially, and then not being supported for a long time after they've been manufactured. Now, a lot of these questions we don't know the longevity quite yet, but GPX Moto does have a very good track record. I'm very confident with this company keeping up with parts and support simply since they've been around for well over 2 decades. Now, I know what many of you are thinking is that you could go out and buy an older used dual sport or dirt bike for right around that $4,000 mark, and yeah, you can definitely do that and get some name brand and have parts availability or be comfortable in a Suzuki or a Kawasaki. But buying a brand new bike and having the serviceability of this, the suspension parts on this bike are in fact all KTM seals for the most part, so off-the-shelf parts to repair the suspension. Engine parts, this engine is one of the most commonly used engines worldwide right now that China produces. So I really don't think that we will have a lot of problems finding parts of these bikes in the future. Well, this was just my first ride and some of my impressions that I had while riding Captain Jack's. I hope you enjoyed the footage. I had a lot of fun riding that day. We didn't get all the way through the trail because of some snow, but we had a ton of fun. Now, if you haven't liked or subscribed, please like or subscribe the channel. It really helps me out. And we have 4 of these GPX Moto bikes. We have the 450R, 300, and a 250E. We have 2 300s actually, and we're going to be testing a few different things on each of those bikes. Maker Extreme and I started a company here in Colorado Springs, Colorado called A&MMototoys.com. The link will be in the description below. So if you have any ideas or have any wants to come out to Colorado to do some riding, we'll be renting these bikes out. I also plan to have a few other bikes in the fleet by that time too, so feel free to check us out. Well, YouTubers, thanks for watching. Always appreciate it. Catch y'all on the next one. Ferret Face out.